As far as holidays go, um, they do not celebrate Mexican holidays like Cinco de Mayo, which honestly Mexicans don't even really celebrate. Um, they do celebrate Easter, which is called La Semana Santa, the Holy Week. It's a much bigger celebration. 40 days before they have Ash Wednesday and Lent. Um, and I saw a lot of crosses in front of the house in the lawn, and they drape like a sheet of cloth. And based on the time, they'd change the color of it. So during Lent, it's purple, and during Holy Week, it's I think red, and then on the Resurrection Day, it's white. So I did see that a lot of the holidays are related to the Catholic faith. So especially during those times, I noticed that a lot of people were a lot less prone to let us teach them. During Christmas time, I ate a lot of tamales. um, that's just their friendly way of welcoming you to their home. They'd usually invite you in, give you tamales. If you were too full, they'd send you home with tamales, 3 or 4. But the Christmas time is a lot more family-centered and less about the gifts there. Honestly, I mean, I wasn't there to witness, I guess, Christmas morning with any families, but I don't think that they really gave many gifts, maybe just a couple. The night on Christmas Eve, there's lots of fireworks, so that was a little different. Most people stay up really late on Christmas Eve, and that's kind of a bigger deal there. Mother's Day is on August 15th. Independence Day is on September 15th. They do not celebrate Halloween. I heard, I'm not sure if it's true, but apparently some kids got poisoned by the candy. So now it's more of an adult holiday, and it's not exactly moral. what the people do that do celebrate Halloween, they usually just wear immoral costumes. And Valentine's Day, they celebrate that. But I think those are all the holidays that they celebrate. A good way to either get into a home or to be rejected from a home is to identify with a certain team. So it's a good idea to figure out what the family that you're approaching, what team they associate with, before you say what team you're associated with. So there are 3 main teams. There's La Liga, Saprissa. Those are probably the 2 main ones, and then there's Heredia. There's lots of other soccer teams, but those are probably the biggest 3. So Saprissa is based in Tibas, and that's where I first started my mission. So I was a sapricista. But I also served in Alajuela, where La Liga is based. So I kind of had to make sure that I wasn't offending anybody by saying I was sapricista. And then I also served in Heredia, so I kind of got to see all 3. There's a lot of tension and competition when that game comes around between those teams.
Okay, so holidays first. In April is Semana Santa. So like when we're here celebrating Easter, they have Semana Santa. And they always have a huge parade and a procession, and they have events going on every day throughout the whole week. Sometimes it's fun to watch, and sometimes it's a little overwhelming. But it's definitely a huge cultural thing for them to celebrate Semana Santa. And then in September 18th is their Independence Day. And actually a lot of countries in Central America and Mexico celebrate this day of independence. And so there's always a huge festival. Schools put on parades. Everyone dresses up. Costa Rica's colors are red, white, and blue, or very similar to a lot of countries. And they have a typical dress that they wear just for this holiday. There's not really like typical clothing that's kind of like Guatemala or Peru, where they have patterns or colors or types of clothing that's very typical for them. Costa Rica doesn't really have that. But for this holiday, they do. They have the women wear this white dress that has like a big, I don't know what to call it, but basically just like drapes over right here, and then they have ribbon going across the dress that are red and blue. And then men wear like a hat, and they have like this other, like a white shirt that has the red and blue designs on it. Very fun to see the locals participating in those events. And then Christmas, they also are really big with doing parades and festivals and celebrations for that as well. So in Costa Rica, and this is with Latin people in general, but people in Costa Rica are very friendly. They will offer you what they have, even if it's not much, even if it's a glass of juice. If that's all they have in their home, like, you will drink a glass of juice before you leave their house. They're very generous when it comes to that. And they have a saying that actually drove all of us missionaries nuts. They'd say, si Dios quiere, or if God wants. So we would ask them, like, hermano, are you coming to church on Sunday? Ah, si Dios quiere, like, if God wants. We're like, of course he wants you to go to church. But that was that would be his way of saying, oh, yeah, like, yeah, I'll be there. But he's really not sure, and then they don't come. But yeah, so si Dios quiere. And they say that in regards to anything, like, not just to the missionaries. They say that to everybody. Costa Rica people, another thing. So they call themselves ticos or ticas. So ticos for men and ticas for women. So you'll hear that a lot. And soccer is a huge thing in Costa Rica as well. So they have 3 major soccer teams, La Liga, Saprissa, and Heredia. And Heredia is kind of like off to the side, like the big, like, what's the word I'm looking, like the, like, dual, or the, anyway, is Saprissa and La Liga. Like, you are either liguista or sapricista, and, like, that is just how it is. So you'll hear a lot of that in Costa Rica as well. Let's see, but yeah, they're just a very friendly people. They are very welcoming, and like I had said before, like, they welcome anyone to come into their home, and they love to make connections and are just very friendly. Very straight up people. So if there's something you don't like, or something that's bothering you, or if they feed you something and you don't like it, or you can't eat it for whatever reason, like, be polite about it, but just tell them, like, hey, I can't eat this, or, you know, I don't really like this. They prefer honesty instead of you trying to beat around the bush, which is sometimes really hard because we do that a lot here. But they just prefer to be straight up and very honest, and so, which is something that's really great and also hard to adjust to. The Latin culture is giving kisses on the cheek to each other. So elders are, for obvious reasons, are not allowed to do that. But sister missionaries can do it to women, but they can't greet men with the kiss on the cheek. So elders just give handshakes to everybody, and then sister missionaries can greet other women with a kiss on the cheek. So that's also very common and something to get used to. And then you also, when you enter a home or when you leave a home, you have to greet and say goodbye to every single person. So it may take you an additional 5 minutes to leave the house, but just that's how it is. Culturally acceptable and expected to go and say goodbye to every single person. Or when you get to a house, you know, give them a kiss on the cheek or shake their hand, and do that to every single person as you get there, and then do it again to every single person as you leave the house. So it's a huge thing that, and if you don't, they understand, because it is a cultural thing, but because you are there and you're living there and want to be respectful of their culture, it's something important for you to do.
Soccer. Soccer is a tradition that is just massive in Costa Rica. They have actually two major teams that play throughout the country. One is called Alajuela. That's one of the major cities in the main valley, and probably like half the country are go with the Alajuela team, and that's the colors are red and black. And the other team is called Saprissa, and that's on the other side of the valley. And then like the other half of the country goes with them. But this soccer tradition is so ingrained and so deep in the people in Costa Rica that if you wear the other team's colors in that location, I mean, you're setting yourself up for harassment, for ridicule. There was a sister missionary who was working in that Saprissa area, and I didn't mention Saprissa colors are purple and white. So you've got red and black and purple and white. There was a sister missionary that was working in one of the areas that was deep Saprissa, and it started to rain, and she had an umbrella, which most umbrellas are black, and she had the umbrella out, and a lady came out and threw a glass of water in her face because she had a black umbrella, and it was for the other team. And so soccer tradition and loyalties run very deep in Costa Rica, and I'm sure there are crimes that have been committed over the colors or the loyalties, but more so than just the loyalties to those two teams, soccer is major. So if you know soccer or you know any tricks, don't feel bad if the 6-year-olds can outdo you in the country. So they dance in the streets and they play soccer all the time. So you really get along well if you can kick the ball back to them or do stuff with the little kids. You'll really bond well with them if you can do something in soccer. But most of the time they'll outdo you.
So the currency in Costa Rica is the colon. So they have like kind of smaller coins. They're like 500 colones, and that's about how much you pay for a really long bus ride. But usually the smaller bus rides, like to the city, are like 250 colones, which is about 50 cents. So 1,000 colones, which is one. It's a rojo. They just call it the rojo because it's red. That's $2. So for rent, in most of my areas, we paid around 50,000 colones, me and my companion. So that's $100 each. But so honestly, that's pretty cheap for an apartment for a whole month. And so we'd also pay somebody usually to do our laundry. So we pay them about $20 a month for that. And then if you did have a cook, we usually paid them about $120 to cook us lunch every month. So the main thing that was the most expensive was the food. But yeah, so the mission works right now, like you just get a budget. So each area has a specific budget because, for example, in Liberia and Limon, like you have to pay a lot more to travel, to go to district meetings and to go to further out areas to visit investigators. So they have like a higher budget for transportation. So it varies based on the area, but usually the rates are about the same in every area. It's definitely more expensive in Costa Rica than any other Central American country. So people there definitely make a lot less money per hour. I mean, I think I asked like a guy that worked on a farm, and I think he made maybe $40 a day, if that. But I think that's even a lot for a lot of people that work there. But yeah, a lot of people just have like their own business. Yeah, like if they know how to repair shoes, if they know how to sew. So a lot of people just kind of find their own jobs. I know there are a lot of big, huge companies like Intel and HP that are down in Costa Rica. I think it's even called the Silicon Republic because it's got a lot of those companies down there. So a lot of people also work for like call centers. So English is a really valuable tool for people down there. So I taught lots of English classes and people were always pretty interested. So that was also a useful finding method. because people definitely have an interest for English. And even the schools, they teach English very early on. I remember I helped out with a spelling bee for elementary school kids that had to spell out really long words. And I was amazed how these second and third graders could spell out Wednesday in English using English letters. So I was very impressed how much English people did know and how much they can use it to find a better career and job.
Okay, Costa Rica is amazing. It is a beautiful little country. It's tiny. It's like the third of the size of Utah, yet it takes 3 times as long to get anywhere. I had bus rides from my areas to get into San Jose that would take 5 or 6 hours, like just horrendous. And it is about the same distance of going, I don't know, maybe Logan to Salt Lake, like about that same amount of distance, but because of the infrastructure, like the highway systems and the roads they have, it just takes forever to get anywhere, distance-wise. Within the cities, if you're in the big city, you'll take buses everywhere. It is just a walking mission, so no bikes. And so, you just walk everywhere. If there's public transportation offered, you'll take that as well. Sometimes if you're in a hurry, you got to get to an appointment or somewhere and you're on the other side of your area, sometimes you might take a taxi. Usually it's just we walk everywhere or take the buses. And Costa Rica is really interesting too. So as I had said before, it's a really small country, but in that small country, there's a whole bunch of different climate. So it's like they usually just have like summer and rainy season. Like that's all they have. And when it rains like none other. It's so crazy. Like I can't even tell you how many times I got soaked. And my umbrellas broke. Like I had to buy, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 umbrellas on my mission just because it rained so much and it was windy and my umbrellas were breaking all the time. But I wouldn't trade those memories for anything. Like as frustrating as it was just like made my mission so much more fun. There's parts of Costa Rica that are really hot and dry, like in Guanacaste, so that's like in the East Mission or the West Mission now. And then there's areas in San Jose that are colder, like Cartago is really cold. That pertains to the East Mission. And then there's areas where it's just like mild climate, a little bit of humidity, and then there's other places that are just hot and humid and miserable. So you really get a little bit of everything in one tiny country. And then there's really cool animals. Depending on where you're at in the country, you may see a sloth, which is really hard to come by. There's beautiful birds, crocodiles, iguanas. I mean, there's a lot of exotic animals. It just really depends on where you're at as to whether you're going to see them or not. I didn't see a whole lot of cool creatures or animals while I was there on my mission, just because I wasn't in areas where those were relevant. I did get a chance to go back this summer to visit, and I saw a lot of cool things. And then food is good. It's not spicy, which sometimes I disliked because I love spicy food, and a lot of their food is just very just like natural flavors. They don't add a lot of spice to their things, but you will eat rice and beans every day. And they have something that's called pinto, which is like their own version of a mixed rice and beans. And they eat lots of salsa lisano, which is also really good. They put that into their pinto. And natilla. Natilla is huge. It's like a staple for them. It's like their version of sour cream. And basically, you'll eat just a lot of what's called casadas, and it's just a plate of like their rice and beans or pinto, fried plantains, plátanos, and then like some sort of meat, usually like chicken or pork, and then like a little side salad. And their salads consist of tomato and cucumber or cabbage. And everything has lime and salt on it. everything, all the time. Another great thing is they always make fresh juices out of the fruit there, which is so great. I loved it, and that's something I miss immensely about Costa Rica is having fresh juice every day. The tropical fruits down there are amazing. I had mentioned pinto. That's a huge food. They will eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like, that is the food you will eat for your time in Costa Rica. They also make a really great meal. This is something that's typical of Costa Rica. They don't have a ton of typical meals, but something that is typical of there is something called chifrijo, which is rice, white rice, and then either black or pinto beans. But it's a little bit more soupy. They leave the liquid in it. And then they top it with chicharrón, which is fried pork skin, and avocado and pico, and you eat it with tortilla chips. And that was like my most favorite meal in Costa Rica. I loved it so much. Another thing is, so they have their version of convenience stores are called pulperias, and they're on every corner. Like, you will walk by 700 pulperias a day. Like, we would stop at a pulperia like once or twice a day throughout in between our visits because we were hungry. We wanted a snack, and so we would grab like plantain chips or little candies or something. Everything's really cheap. And so, yeah, pulperias are everywhere. One would be very familiar with that. And yeah, I ate plantain chips all the time too. My most favorite were the plantain chips with limón y sal, lime and salt flavoring on it. And I ate those probably almost every day. Costa Rica also is pretty good about the type of food they eat. So they don't typically eat really strange foods like a lot of other Latin countries do. However, there was one time I ate pig's feet. Actually, I ate it twice. In my first area, there was a lady who made it a lot, and it wasn't my most favorite thing to eat, but it was okay. I ate it to be nice, and it just was an interesting texture, and it's just the pig's foot. Like, you just eat the meat right off the bone. There were people, too, I had heard that would sometimes eat chicken feet. That freaks me out a little bit, but they would eat it. They also eat, they know the missionaries weren't allowed to eat this because sometimes it would make people sick. But they eat sopa de mondongo, which is made out of I think it was cow brains or cow something. I can't remember. Something from the cow, but missionaries weren't allowed to eat it. So, what else? Mosquito bites. I got them all the time. So insect repellent is a very wise thing to have. So housing in Costa Rica is actually pretty nice. It depends on where you're at. I remember my first area, we stayed in kind of a dinky house. It was really dusty and there were cockroaches everywhere. But that's just kind of common anywhere you go, even if you live in a really nice house, like cockroaches are just bound to get into your homes. But they really they take good care of the missionaries. They make sure that you live in a safe area and a safe home. Basically everywhere you live is gated. Like anyone in Costa Rica, all of their houses have what's called a portón, or like a gate. And actually, so speaking of that, most houses don't have doorbells. So you either go to the door and knock, but something that's actually more common and more like culturally acceptable for them is you yell out "upe." So there's like different rumors about where "upe" came from, but I think the most common that I heard was that "upe" was the Costa Ricans trying to say open in English. And so "upe," you yell out "upe," like "upe buenas," and you yell that at someone's door instead of knocking so that they know that someone's there and then they come open the door. So that was like something to have to get used to. And then it was hard coming home and not saying that when I go to someone's house. Well, actually, so it's really hard for a lot of people to get work in Costa Rica. I came across a lot of investigators and members that didn't have work, or they were working jobs that didn't pay very much. So Costa Rica is an actually pretty expensive country. It's the most expensive in all of Central America. And it's okay for like Americans because we have more money, or we make more money than what they do. So rent for a home, like an entire house, is probably the equivalent of, you know, $300 or $400 rent for an entire house. And for us, that's really cheap. But for them, they don't make very much money. And so food is about the same price as what we pay here, or sometimes more expensive. But they make less money than we do. So it's really an interesting dynamic to see that, you know, they're working jobs that we have here in the States, but they make way less money than we do. I remember there's a one of my member friends from my second area, he's a surgeon. Like he assists with animal surgery, which something here would be like, you would make a really good amount of money, but for him, he like makes barely just enough to provide for his family. So it's interesting to see that living, like housing and food and work dynamic there. Yeah, but then there's a lot of people who come from Nicaragua to live in Costa Rica and work, because Nicaragua is even more in of like a work crisis than Costa Rica is. So there's a lot of them who come. And so going into Costa Rica, more likely than not, especially in San Jose and everything up, somewhere in the West Mission, there's a lot of people who are from Nicaragua that are there trying to work. And then in the East Mission, there's a lot of indigenous people because they come from Panama. And right on that border is where there's a lot of indigenous tribes. And so there's a lot of people who are there. And the main source of work for them is picking coffee beans. It's a really tedious job, but it's something that they can do because a lot of them are not literate in Spanish, or they speak very little. And so that's, you know, the only work that they can do. So they are like working in the fields or getting coffee beans. Coffee is a huge thing in Costa Rica, like huge. So a lot of times investigators would offer us coffee. And we're like, no, like it's okay. And they're like, why? Like you don't want coffee? Like we're known for coffee. Oh yeah, so Costa Rica is a pretty safe country, safer than most in Central America. I mean, you do have to have precaution. There are, you know, some dangerous parts, but generally speaking, Costa Rica is very safe. And places to go, things to do. Costa Rica is known for its beaches, which is really hard because as a missionary, you're not allowed to go there. But there's a ton of other things that you can do with permission from your president. So there's volcanoes, there's some like other national parks or hikes that are really beautiful you can go on. Again, just depending on what part of Costa Rica you're in is what locals do. In San Jose, there's more like museums and like little theme parks for kids. And then as you get further out into the other areas, there's more natural things you can go do. So go see the volcanoes or go on a hike, things like that. But anywhere you go, there's always something fun or something beautiful to go see.
If you're lucky enough to serve in the western part of Costa Rica, which, yeah, there's the Central Valley that has, when I was there were only, I think, 12 zones. I think there's much more now. They have an extra stake in the country. They had 4 or 5 when I was there. They have at least one more. But outside of the Central Valley, there's a string of towns heading out to the east, to the Caribbean coast. But there aren't too many people. It's a very wild area out there. Still not many people living out there, not many roads. But out to the west, that's where you get all of the beaches that surfers go to and the most popular volcano there and stuff. So there's many more people out there. So you do have a few zones out there. And if you're lucky enough to go out in that area, many times you will be around monkeys. So a lot of missionaries wanted to go out there and see the monkeys. That was fun. In the country, throughout the whole country, you do have to deal with just monstrous mosquitoes. As I'm Native American, I'm brown, and they have some people said in Costa Rica that mosquitoes don't like brown skin, but they like white. And so I never had that much of an issue with mosquitoes, but I had some companions who would just get eaten alive, and I'd be next to them being, every now and then swat at one or something, and it wasn't much of an issue for me. Let's see, what other wildlife do you have? Oh, spiders. They have really big spiders down there. And most of them aren't, not tarantula type or, wanting to, eat you in your sleep or something. A lot of them are just the garden variety type spiders that just eat bugs. But there's one that's of this variety, but that was still horrific. It was normally about that big with legs. These long, spindly, and it was, I don't know. It was designed to scare people. They're these spindly legs that were mostly black with some dark green, and they had yellow spots and flecks on them, which is just, I don't know. I hate spiders. But they had long, thin bodies between all these legs, and supposedly they don't bite people at all. Like you would see a lot of the Costa Ricans who would pull them off the webs and let them walk around their hands and their arms and, try to offer them to you. And of course, in the United States, you don't play with spiders much. and it's something they do there. But those spiders were everywhere, especially as you get more into the, closer to the mountains. I served in a couple areas that were at the foothills of the mountains. The Central Valley is in a bowl, so there's mountains up all around it. And you get closer to those mountains, there's more trees and more wildlife, and you get more spiders. Sometimes above the roads where the trees came up, you'd have webs stretching across the entire space between the trees. And they're yellow webs, which make it even creepier. Yellow webs, and you'd see just spiders every now and then, or spiders would fall, hopefully not on you when you're walking, but they would fall, and you'd see crushed spiders on the road that had been run over by cars. And when I was in more arid areas outside, close to the mountains, you see lots and lots of spiders. As a missionary, you'll get used to seeing, dogs. Of course, they're domestic, most of them. But people don't have fences, or if they do, a lot of times they just let their dogs run wild, or else the dogs just run everywhere. But we used our umbrella at least as much as we did for rain, we did for keeping dogs away. They normally don't bite. They just want to get close and harass you, but, you open the umbrella around them and stuff. I know that's not, tropical fauna or anything, but there were lots of dogs, and that was one thing that I wish I had known before going there, that there would be lots of dogs running, but that's kind of ironic, There's the mailman or missionary that have dogs running after them. But we did have those. Let's see, flora and fauna. Lots and lots of fruits and vegetables. You'll have lots of fruit trees just growing everywhere. I found out during my mission, unfortunately, that I was allergic to mangoes. And it was after that, serendipitously, that we had lots of mango trees in the apartments I lived in afterwards. Sometimes where it'd be dodging, walking around. I just didn't want to be near them, but mango tree right outside our door. And mangoes, when they fall off all the time, or squirrels, you start eating them and they'll fall off. And most of the time, they'll just rot on the ground. There are way too many mangoes and papayas and things for anybody to really care about. So, lots and lots of fruit. Mango, papaya, those are extremely common. Cantaloupe, very common. And then they have a few more things. Tamarindo, I think it's called tamarind in English. It's kind of a seed. I think it grows on like palm trees or something, but they make juices out of that. They have certain little fruit that's called cas in Costa Rica that they make fruits out of that, or drinks out of that I absolutely love. So kind of the tropicalness that you'd expect going down there, in the sense that extremely big leaves, lots and lots of green. I don't think there's much in the way of poison ivy or stuff like that, but you could easily have an allergic reaction to something out there. So you don't want to go running through the jungle willy-nilly. But you do get exposed to lots and lots of greenery, lots of flowers, lots of gigantic bugs that you never thought you would see that big. Dragonflies, beetles, and stuff, but nothing to be afraid of. So it was, I loved it. And I've been back a couple times with my wife, and we've had fun with those spiders and stuff, but it was really wonderful.
So I feel like Tibas is a pretty typical city, I guess, but not typical of like the campo, the kind of the rural parts. But all the houses are right up next to each other. I was very shocked by that. So I could like hear what's going on in the house next to me a lot. Also, there are not any dryers. People always, when they do their laundry, they just let it dry outside, which I still am not sure how they dry their clothes during the rainy season. But they do it. Also, you always wash your dishes because they don't have dishwashers there either. Most people have fridges, and rarely do people bake. They have a stovetop, but some people that even have a stove with an oven, they don't even use the oven. So Tibas, like any other city, like the center is the Catholic church, and then there's a park, and then around that there's lots of little shops. Lots of people have like shoe repair stores, just kind of like more of those sorts of jobs. Lots of little tiny stores for like school supplies. And then you kind of trickle out, like the houses are like really close to the center. And people always get around using the bus. Honestly, there's not a ton of people that have cars. Usually people that do have cars have a lot more money. But bus fares are pretty cheap, about like 50 cents. So that's how a lot of people got to and from everywhere, like from San Jose to Tibas and Tibas to lots of other major cities. But yeah, I got used to giving up my seat because the buses were usually pretty crowded. And lots of like pregnant women, even ticos would give up their seat, like if they see a woman. So there's a lot of etiquette on the bus. There's like a little string that you pull whenever you're about to stop, so the bus driver knows where to let you off. But yeah, I just got really used to the bus atmosphere. There's a lot of people that try to sell you stuff on the bus. They'll get in front and kind of give you their pitch and then go seat by seat. Some people also ask for money that way, some beggars. But honestly, a lot of missionaries, we use that as a way to share the gospel. We'd get up on the bus and share a message and pass out pamphlets. So we kind of use it as an effective strategy. Some of the buses that go to the further areas, like Limon and Liberia, there's even like 2-decker buses, and the ride's like a couple hours. So you have a lot of time. Sometimes they even have movies going. But buses were a good opportunity to meet new people, because usually you'd try to find an empty seat and next to somebody, and you'd talk to them the whole ride. So there's definitely lots of effective, I guess, finding techniques just through transportation, because you don't have a car. We also couldn't ride bikes, so we'd either always walk everywhere or ride the bus. Typical schedule, I guess, we'd have our morning studies, and then we'd go and eat. In Tibas, we had it scheduled so that we'd eat at a different member's house every day. But in a lot of my other areas, we paid somebody about 60 mil, which is about $120 a month, for them to give us lunch every day. So we'd have lunch provided for us with that, but then for dinner we'd have to, either if investigators or members wanted to feed us, then we could go. But honestly, lunch there is the big meal. So right after studies, we'd have lunch, and then we'd start our day. So at the beginning of my mission with my mission president, we were transitioning from the old mission president, so we were still tracting a lot. So I remember knocking on lots of doors. But with my new mission president, we started emphasizing that we shouldn't ever be knocking on doors for like more than an hour. Like if an appointment fell through, we could knock doors, but usually we always had appointments. I don't remember being in the street a ton. Usually the members would either give us lots of referrals, or we'd find lots of people on the street. Usually we'd find people just in the street. We didn't even have to knock the door, but a lot of people were out walking, so we'd find them that way. But as far as maybe safety, there were definitely areas, especially in Tibas, that were a little scarier. I mean, it's not common for missionaries to get robbed, but I did just once. There was a drunk man that punched me and told me to give him the money that I had, but nothing too serious. I was very calm through it all. So I honestly didn't feel threatened too much.